Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin. I'm so excited that summer has come to an end, at least for me. I definitely am the type of person that looks at September 1st as the first day of fall, and it is August 30th when I'm filming this video, so summer is slowly coming to an end for us, at least for me. I wanted to do my summer wrap-up video, so these are all the books that I read in the past 3 months. So I considered summer to be June, July, and August, and I surprisingly did a pretty good job, I think, and I read a total of 10 books, and majority of the books that I read during the summertime were books for my summer TBR, so I do want to pat myself on the back for that. I definitely focused my summertime a lot more on the romances just because I was looking for things that were more light and cute and wasn't something that was going to be too much of an emotional or a deep read for me, but I still felt those emotions with the books that I selected and the books that I read. So regardless, I think it was a really good summer reading month, and I did have a couple of fantasies, I had a thriller in there, so I definitely went out of my comfort zone and read books in different genres that I typically don't read in general or that I typically don't read during the summertime, so I'm very happy that I did that as well. I had some really high highs, I had some really low lows, and I had a DNF, which we will get into at the end of this video. But without further ado, let's go into all the books that I read this summer, giving you kind of a synopsis, my thoughts on every single one of them, and then my ranking. The first book that I read in the summertime is Magnolia Parks Into the Dark by Jessa Hastings. This is the fourth book in the Magnolia Parks universe series, and it is the last book that is going to be told in Magnolia and BJ's perspective. If you are not familiar with the Magnolia Parks universe, I highly recommend you go watch my reading vlog where I read the first, I think, 4 books. Wait, this is the 5th book, not the 4th book. This is the 5th book in the series, but I highly recommend you go watch the reading vlog where I read the first 4 books to kind of get an idea of what the book series is about. A lot of people compare it to Gossip Girl and is like the British version of Gossip Girl. This is a final book following Magnolia and BJ's story and their timeline, and I absolutely loved this book. I have an entire reading vlog just dedicated to this book actually, and it is quite an emotional read for me, and it was a really good start to the summer. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was the perfect conclusion to this part of the series, and I think that BJ and Magnolia have gone through so much together as a couple but also as individual characters, and I think that Jessa really took her time writing their character development and their growth, not just in this book but throughout the past 4 books. Something that I want to highlight when I was reading this book was that the way that Jessa wrote grief and loss and that journey and learning how to heal and learning how to still be yourself when a part of you and someone close to you has, unfortunately passed away is something that I felt like Jessa just did such an incredible job with, and I handled it with such care. It was just showing you how much a person can impact so many people's lives, not just the person that they're, I guess, closest to. I just absolutely love this story. I love the Magnolia Parks universe. I love these characters. I cannot wait for Daisy, Christian, and Julian's book, the next Daisy Hates book. I'm a Daisy Hates girly, so I can't wait for that one, but this one was absolutely incredible. I loved it so much. If you have not read it, be prepared for an emotional ride, but it's definitely going to be one that I think you'll really enjoy. So the next book that I read is actually called Bohemian by Catherine Nolan. This is a book that I found through a Reddit post. I think I was looking for like quiet boy romance stories where the male main character is more on the quiet side, he's a little bit more shy, more nerdy, and somebody recommended this book. Honestly, I am so happy that I picked it up because I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and it was probably the biggest surprise for me this year because one, I had no idea what this book really was going into the story, and I didn't read anything or have read anything by this author before, and I got hooked on this book so much. So this book follows our 2 main characters, Calvin and Lucia. The book opens up with us knowing that Calvin's grandfather had recently passed away, and he is an owner of this really popular, or was once a really popular bookstore in Big Sur, California, and he passed down this bookstore to Calvin. However, the bookstore is on the brink of financial ruin, so Calvin kind of leaves his home where he is and he comes to Big Sur to kind of stay there and kind of get things in order, but he's planning on selling this bookstore to whoever is, the best suitor for the bookstore. But in the meantime, Lucia is a supermodel and she comes down to Big Sur because they're doing a hippie photo shoot there, and the two meet each other and they have like a one night stand type of thing, but there's just such this attraction towards them, this connection and this chemistry towards them, and their bond over literature and books and poetry is kind of where they really connect with each other. I just think that the way that their story kind of developed and formed was just really beautiful to see. This is the perfect book to read for the summertime. I wanted to go to Big Sur, California after reading this book. Like, I literally was planning like a trip down there because I was like, I need to go there and experience this, and I want to go to this bookstore that doesn't exist. The way it was just written was just so amazing, and I think what I really loved about this book was that it made me reappreciate my love for literature and books and what it can do for people, the community that it can create for people, and how you can connect over something as simple or not as simple as someone's words and their poetry and their prose and their stories. And I just loved it so much, you guys. I just wanted to read every book that was mentioned in this book because they have a big love for reading and literature. They were constantly recommending like poetry books and like just, you know, sci-fi books and romance books, all the types of books. And I literally bought a couple of the books that were mentioned in this story because I was like, I want to read it. I want to experience it just like them. I was in a happy world when I was reading this book. And I think the feeling that it gave me was really the one thing that I loved the most about it. Bohemian by Catherine Nolan. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next 3 books I'm not going to talk about in too much detail because I do have a summer reading vlog where I read these 3 books. So if you want to have more of like my in-depth thoughts and feelings about them, definitely go check out that video. But the next book I read was Happy Place by Emily Henry. I know, it was about time that I had read Happy Place by Emily Henry. I've noticed like a year behind when it comes to Emily Henry books and her publication. Like I'm probably going to read Funny Story that was released this year, sometime next year, because that's just how I do it. I don't know why, but I'm so happy that I read Happy Place by Emily Henry because it was absolutely incredible. However, I will say it did not start off that way. I started reading this book and I was like, I am not sure if I'm going to like this. And then I don't know what it was. I just got hooked into the story and I was like, I'm in it for the long run. And I think the big thing with this story and me was that I felt like it was such a big reflection of my life and the feelings that I had deep within myself. And it felt like I was holding up a mirror and like exactly how these characters, Wynn and Harriet, how they were feeling, especially Wynn. I felt like I really connected with Wynn. I felt those exact same way. Happy Place follows our 2 main characters, Harriet and Wynn. They met in college, fell in love in college, and were actually engaged before breaking off their engagement. However, they didn't tell any of their friends because they're in this really big friend group, and every year they go to a cottage in Maine. However, this year, this trip that they're going to in Maine is a really big deal because that cottage is being sold. So this is their kind of last big hurrah, and they don't want to tell their friends that they're no longer engaged because they don't want to ruin the vibes and they want everybody to just have a good time. So they keep it a secret and they essentially are pretending to still be together, and it is quite the thing to watch them pretend to still be in love and have their friends think that they are still in love when in reality like they are just struggling. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a hate type of relationship with them. I don't think they hate each other. I think it, like, you know why they're no longer together, and it's just really sad. And I think it just goes to show that as you grow older, you deal with a lot more things and there are a lot more responsibilities that are put on your plate, and you go through these challenges, and it's really hard to still have these maybe relationships that you built in college. You have to be more intentional with maintaining them. Another big theme in this book is friendship and how friendships change and evolve as you get older, and having college friendships become adult friendships and what that's going to look like and the differences in that and what that's going to look like, and how do we still have this friendship even though we're not in college anymore. I just felt like Emily Henry did an amazing job with this one. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm really happy that I read it this summer. I think it is the perfect summer book. Again, another book where I want to visit this place and the setting that is in this book because the way it's written, it is very immersive and it really just pulls you into the story and pulls you into the setting of where these characters are. And I loved it. The next book I read was The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I was excited going into this book because this is the first book that I've read by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I've heard a lot of really good things about this book. So this book follows Cassie, who is recruited by the FBI to join this group of teenagers who have been identified to have these very specific and unique skills to help them crack cold cases. So there's different skills that these teenagers have. One of them I think is really good with numbers and is kind of like has a knowledge bank in her head. The other one is really good at detecting when people are lying. Cassie, and another character, is more of like a profiler, so being able to predict someone's next move. And then I'm forgetting what another person does. It is a really interesting story. If you're really into like Criminal Minds, Law and Order, and things like that, I think you will definitely enjoy this book. There is definitely something going on in Cassie's personal life that interferes with the story. I liked how fast-paced this book was. I liked also how simplistic the writing was. Pretty much like simple sentences. The prose is pretty straightforward. Like, it's not something that I felt like was too complex in that regards, but it definitely kept my attention and I was interested and engaged from start to finish. Only kind of negative thing I have to say about this book, which I guess is not necessarily a negative thing, I think it's just something that will develop as I read more within the series, is there's not much character development. I think this book definitely focuses more on the storyline and the plot and making sure that we're moving the story along. However, I do think the second book follows the storyline of another character, so hopefully, I'm assuming we're gonna get more character development from that, but I definitely felt like I just wish I knew a little bit more about these kids and their stories and like their backgrounds and things like that. But again, it's a series, so we have time to develop that. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I will be reading the second book at some point. The next book I read was also on my Kindle, and it was So This Is War by Megan Quinn. This is the 5th book In the Vancouver Agitators series, I always mess up how to say that. This is a hockey romance series by Megan Quinn. It is one of my favorite hockey romance series that I've ever read because it is so funny and it has such a good like found family trope, which is something that I'm noticing a lot in the hockey romances that I read. I only read them if there's a found family trope because that's how you do it. But it focuses on this friend group and the hockey team, and they each have their own love interests and love stories. And this one follows Posey, who is kind of like the matchmaker of the friend group, and he has definitely helped all his other friends kind of find their love interest and like work it out with their girl when they're having trouble. So it's really nice to kind of get his side of the story and see how he kind of deals with it all when it's his turn to find love. So the book opens up where Posey meets, what's her name, Wiley, at a bar, and they kind of hit it off. They have instant chemistry, but before he can even get her name, number, anything, she runs off. A year later, he's still thinking about her, comes to find out that she is his coach's daughter, so she's completely off limits. However, the coach is a horrible person, and Wiley she withdrew enrollment from, I think she's like in some type of business school. She withdrew enrollment because it wasn't what she wanted to do, and her dad is like so upset about this. He's like, you don't know what you're doing with your life. And to teach her a lesson, she has Posey hire her as his assistant. However, the coach is like, I want you to make her life a living hell. I want you to give her the most ridiculous tasks so she can really get a feel of how the real world works. And it's just ridiculous. As I'm saying the plot of the story, I'm realizing how unserious this book really is. And when you read the different like tasks that Posey is making her do, which is really not Posey making her do it, it's Posey's coach, which is her dad, that's making him do it, because I think her dad is like on a power trip or something this entire book. It's really, really bad, but it's just really funny. It's really, really funny. I think Megan Quinn does humor and romance really well. Like, she is, I would say, like one of my favorite rom-com writers. I will say that it was a bit too smutty at times. I felt like sometimes I'm like, okay, like I understand this is a important part of y'all's relationship, but I want to see how you guys are outside of that a little bit more. But yeah, I think it was just a really fun book for me to read. Another thing, I think sometimes some of the storylines were kind of underdeveloped, and I felt like we kind of just brushed off certain things that I was like, I don't like the way we did that, but okay, I understand this is like a light story, so we have to keep things light. But I think sometimes I kind of wish we kind of delved a little bit deeper into certain things and certain themes and certain relationships. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it was a really good conclusion to this series and this friend group, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think there's like a spin-off series that's going to be following another character who is part of the friend group but wasn't originally part of the friend group, so I'm excited for that. The next book is none other than A Court of Thorn and Roses, also known as Aatar. I have been putting this book off for years. I started reading this book years ago when I originally bought it. I think it was like 2018, and I got like 100 and something pages in. I think 180 something or 50 something pages in, and I DNF'd it because I was like, I don't like this. I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to read it. However, I am somebody who has a bad case of reading FOMO, and I want to know what the girlies are talking about when they were talking about Aatar and all these characters. I want to know. I want to know. So I picked it up eventually. I've been putting it on my TBRs for months and months and months and months and just never getting to it, and I finally just bit the bullet and read it. I will say I did read this on Audible. That is the only way I got through this book. I could not sit down and actually read it like physically. I had to listen to it because there was no other way I was going to get through this book, because as I was reading it, I was like, I know why I DNF this book. The first 200 pages are a slug to get through. The pacing is really, really, really slow, but once you get past the 200 pages and things start moving along, things get really, really interesting, and the last like 100 pages are like crazy. So Aatar follows our main character, Farah. She is a human girl, and one day she's in the woods looking for food for her family, I think, and she kills a wolf. Come to find out, the wolf that she kills is a big deal, and a mystical beast comes to her family home and is like, I'm going to take you for retribution, and you have to come live with me at this fairyland place or fey-land place called the Spring Court. And she's like, well, I don't want to die, so I'm gonna go with you. And she leaves her family and she goes to the Spring Court and is introduced to the world of fae, and all these crazy things start happening and riddles. It's just a mess, all because she killed a wolf. But there's a reason for it. Overall, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I think that it was a decent start to the beginning of the series. The next book I'm going to talk about is one that I'm so I read Reckless by Elsie Silver, and this is the 3rd book I have read by Elsie Silver. This is the, I think, 4th book in the Chestnut Spring series, a very, very popular cowboy series, and I have tried multiple books in this series, and it's just not working for me. I think this is it. I'm done with it. After this book, I was like, I can't do it anymore. So this book follows Theo, who is a bull rider, and Winter, who is Summer's sister that we were introduced to in the 1st book. And Winter is supposed to be this very cold and mean person. Sure, I guess. My issue with this book was that I felt like the story fell very, very flat. Theo and Winter have a one night stand, and come to find out, Winter's pregnant. So it's a surprise pregnancy trope, and there's not much to the story, if I'm being completely honest. I felt like it wasn't a developed story. I felt like the characters were flat. I felt like the storyline was flat. I just felt like I was reading individual scenes that were put together rather than a story that I think flowed from right to left in some kind of order. I also don't like bull writing at all, and anytime those scenes were mentioned, I was just bored out of my mind, not interested at all. I also felt like any conflict that was mentioned in the story, again, was just not developed, and it wasn't really talked about, and it kind of was brushed over. Again, very surface level writing and very surface level storytelling in my personal opinion. I did not hate this book as much as I hated the second book in the story, or no, the third. I don't know the order of these books. Whatever the book is with the old guy, I think his name's Cade. Ooh, that book. You guys will hear about how I feel about that book at the end of the year when I do like my best and worst of 2024, but I really did not like that book. But this one I gave 2 stars. Again, I think it's a wrap for me and Miss Elsie Silver. It's not for me. The next book I read was the second book in the Court of Thorn and Roses, which is A Court of Mist and Fury. I think they call it Akamoth. I'm trying to remember all these acronyms, by Sarah J Maas. And this one went so much better than the first book. I felt like the pacing was so much faster, and the ending of this book, more insane. I absolutely loved the new kind of set of characters that we met and the new world that we were, not necessarily world, but the new setting that we were introduced to. I fell in love with that. Cassian and Azriel, I love them so much. It's way more action heavy, which I really liked. I feel like that was something that was lacking, especially in the first like 200 pages of Aatar. Definitely felt like the action was lacking, and this one is a little bit more action packed. I enjoyed the romance a little bit more in this book, as I'm sure most people do. I loved how complex certain characters were. A character that I really, really enjoy, and I eventually, when I continue on the series, I don't know if I'm going to continue, but I think Nesta is a character that is really misunderstood, and I really like her character, and I think her character is quite complex. Also with Tamlin, I know a lot of people are not a fan of Tamlin, but I think Tamlin is also a complex character, and I'm not one to just write off characters because they make bad decisions or they do things that are not quite right. I think that these characters are not the villains of the story, and I think that I'm really curious to see what their kind of arcs are going to look like and further development of who they are and their storylines. I'm really curious to see what all that's going to look like and how it's going to come into play. I did start the third book. I'm decently far into it. I just kind of lost interest a little bit, and the books are really, really big. Like, they're thick books, and I just don't know if I have the mental power to continue reading them, if I'm being completely honest. So who knows when I'll pick up this story ever again. I might. I don't know. We'll see. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was one of my most anticipated releases of the summer, and that is Fall With Me by Becca Mag. I love Becca Mag. I feel like that's one thing, if you've been watching my videos for a while, is you know how much I love Becca Mack, and I love her Playing for Keeps series, which is another hockey romance series that I absolutely love. It's my favorite one. If there's one hockey romance series you should read, it's definitely Playing for Keeps. But this is the 4th book in the series Fall With Me, and it follows Jackson and Lennon in their story. Another one night stand type of situation. Jackson and Lennon are vacationing at the same place, and Lennon is supposed to be on her honeymoon, but her fiance is a horrible person, so she left her fiance and is just taking the vacation just to take the vacation, and they have a one night stand at this place, and they never thought they're going to see each other again, as you expect when you have a one night stand. Come to find out, Lennon is a new hockey team photographer, so they are kind of forced to be near each other again. And it's not necessarily enemies to lovers type of situation, because they're not really enemies. They just like bicker a lot in the beginning. They have a lot in common, and I think they bring out the best in each other, and it's really beautiful to kind of see the relationship blossom. There's also more of like a forced proximity trope, like a roommate situation that happens because something happens with Lennon's apartment, and Jackson is so nice and is like, you can stay with me. And something that I think that Becca Mack does incredibly well with the series is the found family trope. She just creates this group of friends in a way that feels so real and that feels so genuine, and it's not even just like, okay, you read, you know, their book with this person's love interest and that's it. You never really get to see their relationship blossom or grow ever again. It's like, no, you see characters and relationships that we're introduced to in the first book. The first book follows this couple, Carter and Olivia. You get to see throughout the rest of the books like how their relationship is growing and blossoming, and that was something that I really enjoyed seeing in this book. Same thing with like Adam and Rosie and Garrett and Jenny. Like, it's just beautiful to see how everybody's relationship is growing. And Jackson is someone who has his own personal struggles and I think his own insecurities, and I love the way that Becca handled that and talked about that, and how he leaned on his friends for support. He leaned on Lennon for support, and he also had to like recognize that he had to like do some healing on his own as well, and he had to like fight some of those insecurities and demons because it was preventing him from fully being able to be present in his friendships and in his romantic relationship. There's also a cat. Jackson has a cat named Mittens, and they're absolutely adorable. So, you know, we always get dogs as the pets, so I love that we have a cat. And another thing I love too is that there are wholesome scenes in this book, and I love how it's like a good mix of like emotions and like, you know, there's there's those spicy scenes, but we also have just like everyday regular scenes. Like there's one scene when Jackson is doing Lennon's like hair care routine, and it's just like, oh my god. Thank you, Becca, for including that, because that was actually one of the sweetest things and cutest things ever. And it's like just little scenes like that that stand out because you don't see them a lot in romance books. So I just love everything about this book. I thought it was really, really good. It's not my favorite in the series. I think my favorite is still Carter and Olivia's, but Adam and Rosie's is like right there. Ultimately, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait for the final book in the series, which is going to be Emmett and Kara's book, but I think it's going to be amazing. And then the last book I read for the summer is none other than Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington. Y'all, this was that thriller book I was talking about that I read, and it was quite the journey. I think the last reading vlog that I posted, I pretty much read this book that entire week. I think it was like a what I read in a week, and this is the book that I read that week. This book opens up at a college graduation. Our main character, Adina Walker, we find out that all of her college acceptances, especially to Ivy Leagues such as Yale, have been revoked because of an incident that happened between her and another female student, and she is enlisted to join this competition called The Finish, where 12 girls are hand selected. They're selected for various reasons, but they're selected to compete in this competition, basically to do a bunch of different tasks in order to win the social backing that the Remington family have. The Remington family is a very powerful family. They have a lot of social power, and if you win that competition, you basically can do anything you want in life. You will be successful. That's like a guarantee if you win this competition. So for someone who had all of her college acceptances revoked, this is like her one last shot at getting something back for herself. And as you will notice, is that Adina really wants to be successful, and she really wants to win, and not just necessarily the competition, but I think just to win in life. I think there's a lot of adversities that are put in her way, and she just believes that, you know, if I am able to go to this Ivy League college, I'm able to prove something of myself, then like I will be successful. The idea of this book is really interesting. The execution fell for me a little bit. I think the main reason, and I talked about this in my reading vlog, was that I personally don't love Edwina, and not Edwina, I'm thinking of Bridgerton. I personally don't love Adina as the narrator of this story. I think that there is a lot of moving pieces in this story, and I think that this story would have done so much better for me if it was written in third person. There's a lot of different characters that we meet, and I think that getting kind of their perspective, or just something told in something other than Adina's perspective, would have pulled me into the story a little bit more. I know a lot of people think about like Squid Games and Hunger Games type of vibes, because The Finish is not what you think it is, and I think like once you learn more about it, you're like, bro, this is crazy. This is so unserious. Like, I can't believe this is what's going on. Also, the ending of this book was a little bit rushed. I felt like we were just like bam, 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 bam. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we take a step back? Can we take a step back? There's also a romance, kind of, not really. I don't know. I don't even know what you call that. I wanted a little bit more of, or more development of. But again, I think that it would have required us to not be in Adina's perspective 24/7. But that's just my personal take on it. I think overall, for the most part, did enjoy this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So if you are looking for a thriller, if you just are interested in what happens when you put 12 girls in a house who are all fighting for one thing, what can go wrong, what can go right, what can happen, definitely try this out. So like I said, this is the last book that I read over the summer, and I was going to read 11 books in the summer because I'm currently reading a book right now, but I have just decided to DNF this book because it's just not working for me. I really wish it was, but every time I pick up this book, I'm just bored out of my mind, and the small simple chapters, the simple writing, the short chapters, it's not even helping. Like, nothing can get me hooked on this story, and that is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Because I enjoy The Natural so much, I was like, let me read another book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And the premise of this one is actually also really, really interesting. So this book follows our main character, Avery Wood. She's an ordinary girl, kind of like a nobody. One day, she's called to the principal's office because Tobias Hawthorne, who is a billionaire, passes away, and he leaves everything he owns to her. Not his family, not his grandsons, nobody but her. And everybody's like, why her? And that's what we're trying to figure out, is why her. So she goes to the Hawthorne house, and she lives there because that's part of the will. She has to live at the Hawthorne house, I think, for a Hawthorne house for a year. And as she's living there, she's there with the 4 Hawthorne grandsons, and they're about her age, so, you know, there's some romance going on there. There's 2 guys that potentially there's a romance brewing. I don't know. I don't feel anything regarding any of the boys. It's boring. Like, I hate to say it, but like, I'm just bored out of my mind reading this book. I feel like nothing is happening. Like, the pacing is so slow. The chapters are very short, and I think that's part of the reason too, is that I'm not immersed at all. I feel like I'm just reading very like clipped versions of a full chapter, and I feel like the chapters are ending too quickly, and I'm like, I want more from this chapter, and then move on to the next chapter, and I'm like, okay, we're just moving, nothing's happening, there's riddles involved. I don't like riddles that much. I don't get them a lot of the times, but also the riddles involved are just not fun. The clues are not fun. It's supposed to be like a mystery, like, why did he leave all of his fortune to her? And I feel like we're just dragging that, and we're getting nowhere. nowhere. We're getting nowhere with that. We're getting nowhere with the romance. We're getting nowhere with anything. And I am on page 238. I'm literally almost done, but I just don't have it in me to read this book. And I'm not going to. Maybe I'll pick it up one day, because I think, you know, there's a couple of books that I've DNF'd this year that I might want to do a video trying to finish them. Maybe this one will be there. If you've read it and you liked it, please convince me to continue reading it. As of now, this is a DNF. So these are all the physical books that I read this summer, and then the books that were on my Kindle. I read, like I said, a total of 10 books this summer, and out of the 10 books that I read this summer, 7 of those were on my summer TBR. So I read 70% of the books I read this summer were for my summer TBR, but I only read 7 books out of the 22 books that were on my summer TBR. That is including the new releases that I put on my summer TBR and the physical books that were on my physical TBR that I already added on my summer TBR. I don't know if that makes sense, but by my calculation, I read 32% of my summer TBR, which is still okay. I think it was very ambitious for my summer TBR and all the books that I added on there, but I think that I'm really happy with how I think this reading season went. Like I said earlier in the beginning of the video, got some new favorites, realized some books are just not for me. I had a DNF, which is okay. So that is it for this video. I am currently putting together my fall TBR, so if you have any fall recommendations, leave them down below because your girl is ready. I just have some really good books on my TBR. If you've made it this far, comment down below your favorite book from the summer, and I will see you guys in my next video very soon. Bye!